Welcome from Tallinn in Estonia, and I'm very happy and delighted that we are shortly before Christmas discussing a very relevant topic. We're discussing about inflation. Inflation is when you pay $15 for the $10 haircut you used to get for $5 when you had hair. One American writer, Sam Ewing, was pointing that out. And basically, when we are talking about business economy, Estonia is regarded as a digital trendsetter, as a driving force in Europe. But now we see in the last weeks that Estonia obviously is under pressure, highest inflation in the EU. We are talking a lot about the neighbor. We are talking about the general situation, but we also want to talk about the situation, the concrete situation here in Estonia for SMEs, how they are affected due to this crisis moment, and how we can help in Estonia and in Europe. I'm very delighted and thankful that Mr. JÄRVAN, the Minister of Entrepreneurship and Information Technology, is giving us a keynote right now. And after that, we will start a panel. Later, I will introduce the panelists, but please, Mr. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hope you all are doing well. And let me give you just a brief background on the inflation, or at least what's my view on it. So the inflation in Estonia, I think we should look together with the whole Baltic states, because looking at the trend lines, it's quite the same in the Baltics. There are a couple of percentages here and there, but of course, like always, Estonia is winning, but it's quite the same trends in Latvia and Lithuania as well. And it already started actually 2020. We have seen a steady incline of inflation from that period, from January actually. So the question is where it is coming from. Of course, we have seen that it's mostly coming from energy, but how we stand out the Baltic states in Europe, I think, is if you look at the inflation map, and then it's there were speculations that it's correlated with the national spending, what our deficit of budgets are, but actually when, of course, budget discipline is looser in the south and maybe a bit more in the north, then the inflation, we can see clearly that more inflation in the east and less in the west. So we can kind of rule out the connection with budget deficit. But what we can also see is that the countries that had more import from Russia are definitely more affected, and the Baltic states here were definitely the champions in import from Russia. So if memory serves correct, in 2021 there was for Estonia and Latvia 6% from our GDPs were imported from Russia, and Lithuania was like 8%. And if you look at the next ones, it's I think 3%, so less than half of what the Baltic states had imports. So it's not only about energy; it's also cheap material that we use for our manufacturing here, and in a situation where this ceases to exist, of course our economy has to restructure, and in some cases the option is to get higher priced goods from the West. In other cases, there isn't even that kind of option. So yes, we definitely see that the economy is restructuring. Now the question is what can we do about it? There are also some statistical errors that some economists have pointed out. For example, inflation takes into account the energy prices on the market. But at the same time, we know that most citizens and also companies have fixed their prices. So their electricity prices are significantly lower than the price that is currently on the market. So that gives us an idea that actually the real inflation, and I don't mean, so basically the real inflation is actually lower than what the statistics says, but yeah, it's he says, she says, right? So can't give you like it's a question of methodology, and we can argue about methodology all day long. So so questions are what we can do about it. As I said, there are some sectors where we can't do anything about it. For example, the transit sector, our delivery of goods has dropped 10x. So and what are you going to do? Like, we're not going to pay dock workers just to stay around for a few years, because we know that the economy with and trade with Russia most definitely won't restart for years. And to be honest, we're not that sad about it. But at the same time, there's the question about energy, and of course, this is where most important thing is to understand that, or the biggest question is, did energy prices hike before the war? So is the war the guilty party in energy prices or not? And when we look at the graphs, how gas is imported to Europe, then in the beginning of 2010 and so on, it was closely like 20% of EU import came from Russia, and 2019 or so it was 40%. And of course, it's not just random. Of course, price is definitely a factor here, and we see that most probably it was a pre-calculated move to create social tension before the war. And of course, the questions are rising that no, the people are arguing that the prices went up before the war, so the war isn't responsible for that, and it's quite hard to explain that actually this is planned. And Estonia is in a better place than the other Baltic states due to the fact that we have our own energy resource. So oil shale, it's definitely its burning value is less than gas. It's a bit more complicated, and of course the Green Deal in EU is kind of phasing out all these kind of energy resources. But we see that if all countries are building their energy policy on only windmills, and if asked what are you going to do if the wind isn't blowing, and the answer is that okay, in that situation we just buy it from other country, and if all countries have the same plan, then we're going to face huge problems. So we have a way to basically help with inflation, that we have done this universal service for energy, which means that we are providing fixed prices that comes out of the oil shale energy. And this is definitely alleviated the inflation case for especially SMEs, or so at the moment it's for small companies. We're planning to get it for medium companies as well. But the bigger question regarding inflation and changing of economy structure is I think subsidies. And with subsidies, the situation in Europe is varies a lot. different countries are subsidizing in a different way, and some, especially for example Germany, is heavily subsidizing their industry. So of course this puts our companies in a tight spot. Our general approach has been that you can't, if you're a smaller country, there's no way you can win the subsidized race, because it's a race to the bottom. Your companies will not become more efficient. But it's true that if other countries are subsidizing, then in global economy, they're losing their competitive advantage. That's for sure. So now the big question right now that we're facing is it would be better if we wouldn't have to subsidize our companies, but how fast can they react and change their business models in a way that that the country wouldn't have to subsidize them? Because if other countries are subsidizing their companies and we are not, we are much more competitive, and the wealth generated from that is much greater. But yeah, coming back to inflation, it's somewhat normal for Estonia because we have been doing quite well, and the competitive advantage for a lot of companies so far, especially manufacturing, has been the low wages. But as you said, then we are the IT nation, and of course our IT companies are competing globally, and they are driving up the wages. So of course manufacturing, in order to compete for workforce has to match that. And that definitely creates the question, right? Or like foreign investment companies have asked me like you're becoming not competitive because your wages are growing so fast, and I'm saying yes, that is so, and the government will do exactly zero to combat the raise of wages, because in our mind, it's better to be a country with high prices and high wages than with low prices and low wages. And that's the change that is happening right now in Estonia. But I would love to take questions.
So Aite, thank you very much. And we would like to take this opportunity. There are many aspects you have tackled. So are there any questions directly maybe from the panelists?
Not right now.
Okay. Then I would like to ask you, if you're going now to the specific sectors, what do you think, basically, also in the perspective of the next spring, which sectors are the most affected in terms of SMEs, and do you have maybe any specific plans to help them?
Yes, I think with SMEs, of course, the most logical answer is those companies who are using the most energy are the most affected ones. So machine manufacturing, also food industry, they are definitely the most affected ones. But we see for our own consumption, the prices of food have gone up. The consumers are okay with that. But the problem is that basically the shops have raised their margins and not giving that much to the food producers themselves. But I think the market will regulate itself in this case, and it will be fine. With manufacturing, so a really important statistics is that with manufacturing, our value add has been 56% of EU average. So for a long time, our manufacturing industry, basically, they didn't have to change their and do investment for 15 years because price-wise, they were competitive. And this is changing. This is, of course, hurts. There are some old companies that are not willing to invest and change their styles, but I think the bigger picture is that the things are changing there. But yeah, I think food industry and machine manufacturing are some of the most heavily hit. But at the same time, like the market price is some days 300, 400 euros per megawatt hour, and at the same time, our companies are given an option to fix their prices at 180, but for 7 years, and they're telling us that, yeah, but in some years the prices of electricity will probably go down, and then we're out of competition. But that doesn't sound to me like a company who is in dire straits, because maybe in years the price will go down. And the best quote I got from the entrepreneurs was, "Who fixes prices when the market is so volatile?" It was so very interesting, and of course, like it makes sense. Companies would like to have increased profits right now and not later. So yeah.
So thank you very much. Are there any questions? Then maybe just one very last one. What do you think about the inflation in the next year, or what is your guess, basically?
So I guess it's definitely going to drop, but not heavily. My guess is 6%, but we'll see. But in essence, I don't think you can look at inflation on its own. Like for the health of the industry, you have to look at how much the prices are increasing and how much the costs are increasing. So what's the profit situation, right? So and that determines the health of the economy.
Mm-hmm. So Suaite, thank you very much, Mr. Minister.
Thank you.
And now we are going further. I want to introduce our panelists, and I think it's very important to bring what you just said and mentioned, the broader picture, not just inflation, and also to discuss further in depth the impact for the SMEs. And I'm very delighted basically to introduce our 3 speakers and panelists. This is Professor Susanne DURST. She's Professor for Entrepreneurship and International Business at the TalTech, Tallinn University of Technology, and with a broad research focus also on SMEs. Our second speaker and panelist is Mr. Kristo AAB. He's also an economist, macro analyst at the LHV Bank, and also he's member of Estonian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And our third speaker is Eero ELENURM, and he's CEO at Interest Marketing and also chairman of the board at Youth in Science and Business Foundation. So I think we will have a very interesting discussion, and also please feel free to comment, to ask also in the chat or later directly, straightforward. And I would like to give the floor to Professor DURST.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully the tone is still okay. Dear Professor, dear Minister JÄRVAN, dear organizers, dear panelist members, dear broader audience, thank you so much for this great event. And I think it's also a very timely event. And if okay for you, I would briefly introduce myself so that you get a better picture what I'm doing, because I think this is also important to understand what I'm trying to talk about in the next, as Dr. HARTLEB says, in the next 5 minutes. Please give me a sign. So Research-wise, I'm primarily interested in knowledge risk management, crisis management, sustainable business development, and responsible digitalization, with a clear focus on small entrepreneurial companies. And you can imagine specifically the pandemic has given me and my colleagues a very good opportunity to actually study how small companies are coping with a dynamic crisis, because we all have learned that this pandemic has been a new type of a crisis, not only a dynamic crisis, but also something that is called a transboundary crisis. It was very interesting to for a person who is a business economist who is interested in the ongoing development of small and medium-sized enterprises to see how they are coping, how they are handling this. And what we know, the interesting fact actually is that the study of crisis management in small and medium-sized enterprises has only, we can definitely say, started with the pandemic. So far, crisis management, risk management has primarily been studied in the large organizations, in the big organizations. Of course, there were here and there some type of research dedicated to crises and risk, but we can't say before there was nothing very, very specific. And when we turn to this increasing amount of knowledge which is available about crisis/risk management in SMEs, we learned that these approaches are people-oriented, and which is not difficult to explain, because we see in SMEs that there is a strong focus on being close to the employees, being close to customers, as well as other relevant stakeholders. And in conjunction with the pandemic, I had the opportunity to conduct interviews with Estonian entrepreneurs. And I was interested in learning how they are dealing with this crisis called pandemic. And the findings I gathered left the impression that they have what it takes to enable growth, to enable innovation, and also sustainability, not only in their specific organizations, but maybe also in order to help Estonia grow further, and also the other partners. So here, keywords, we know this all: flexibility, disposing of adaptive capacities. And this is also important specifically when we are talking about crises. Small and medium-sized enterprises typically are used to deal with uncertainty. This is something many large organizations are actually not used to do. And we also learned this as a of the pandemic. And we also know from SMEs that they are typically involving their employees. They are actively involving their employees in the continued development of the organization, which is of course a good sign when it comes to coping, when it comes to handling crises. And maybe now you could actually share the first slide with the audience. This figure. The next one, please. Next. Yeah, so here you see, what you see here is something that was developed or that was derived out of these crisis studies that I did in Estonia. And you see this model was actually labeled QAM, and QAM actually is an abbreviation for, you see, quick reactions to stabilize, A, adapting by innovating, and M, mobilize digitalized and strengthened. So the models, the main idea behind this model is actually to show how small firms, how small entrepreneurial firms try to cope with this crisis. And not a big surprise, in the beginning, the focus was primarily on reaction, which is easy to understand. But then you see they quickly turned from these reactions to a proactive approach or proactive approaches, because interestingly, we shouldn't forget it, that this pandemic actually provided these entrepreneurs the time, quality time, to actually reflect on past developments, on the current business model. The Minister JÄRVAN mentioned that new business models are needed, were needed. And actually this time available gave them the opportunity to rethink, to reconsider the business model. And what is also very important, they thought about what kind of new skills, what kind of competences should I, as an entrepreneur, but also should my employees develop, so that we are more or less leaving this pandemic. At that time, you see, we are talking about April 2022. We didn't know what would happen, but the idea was to come out stronger out of this crisis. And what is also very important is the aspect of well-being. You know, well-being has become one of the buzzwords as a consequence of the pandemic, and well-being has been studied before already, but again, as many things, it has been more research has been triggered by the pandemic. And we learned, and this is also, which is not surprising, that when we are interested in developing our understanding of well-being, we should not forget the well-being of the entrepreneur, because we learned in these interviews we conducted, and there were questions related to the well-being, that these owners, these founders, these entrepreneurs were very aware that this pandemic demanded a lot from them. First, they had to be there for their employees. They had to relax them, to calm them down. But on the other hand, they also need to make sure that their own well-being, mental well-being, but also the physical well-being was in such a kind of condition that they were able to continuously address this kind of challenge. And this actually then highlighted this kind of a strong focus and the strong need of having a good balance between the private life and also the business life. And here, that's why you see in the button of this model, this focus on being close to the family, being close with the family, being close to the nature, and also do exercises to have a kind of good balance between mental well-being and physical well-being. So this actually means that there is, in these SMEs, we found a lot which is good and which is forms a very nice basis for addressing the challenges. And now we are coming actually to something we should not forget, and this has been mentioned by the Minister JÄRVAN as well. The inflation is only one, let's say, one outcome. It is very important that when we are thinking of alternative solutions specifically for SMEs, maybe not only for SMEs, but all types of organization, that we think holistically, that we consider all the crises organizations are currently exposed to. And in addition to these external crises, think about the political tensions, think about the energy crisis, think about the ongoing supply chain disruptions, hyperinflation, also extreme weather events in certain kind of countries in certain regions of the world, and on top also the internal challenges like succession planning, which is also becoming more and more a topic in organizations, as well as skills shortage. And all these kind of challenges are taking place at the same time. And you can imagine this is already a significant effort for large companies. So this means that when we are trying to find solutions, we need to cover all these kind of challenges, because otherwise the danger is high that we are only working, you know, on a single event, and then maybe the next event is popping up and we are no longer able to cope with this thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a lot, also a lot of research you did. Before we are coming to our next speaker, maybe just one point I want to discuss further is the aspect, you tackled that a bit, of work-life balance and the psychological factor, which is actually not to underestimate, also in the light that you interviewed entrepreneurs during the pandemic, plus now energy, plus all the Russia war. So it's a lot of, from my social scientist perspective, a lot of also psychology behind it, that maybe entrepreneurs, also people generally have a pessimistic outlook for themselves, and maybe this also affects. But this is just one point, maybe we can elaborate there further. But let us come to our next speaker now. Kristo, who is giving us also the perspective of the banking system here in Estonia, and also as a member of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, also you basically give us also your perspective, as you also worked in the past in Eesti Bank, and we have also this professional banking background, which is important also if you're thinking on central bank and the role generally of the banking system also in the fight against the inflation. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, as Dr. HARTLEB said in the beginning, I'm a macro analyst, so my focus is always on macro data and macro events. So whenever I speak at these kinds of events to businesses and companies, I always find it important to say that you know, we can look at macro data and see some trends that are not necessarily visible for all single companies. So these trends yeah, might be a little bit different. And then as for now, I think this is exactly what's happening. We can read from Estonian media, and we know from context as well, from first-hand context, that we have several businesses, many companies in Estonia who are struggling with the ongoing situation, whether it's coming from higher energy prices, higher input prices in general, or from weaker demand, or from both factors together, or from something else. We've seen already many layoffs in workforce and so on. But now, if we look at macro data, then we must say that on a nation basis, we haven't really seen the situation going really bad yet. At least yet, we haven't seen the data worsening that much. I think it's mostly related to the fact that Estonian consumers, at least, are very flexible and have been able to cope with the high inflation and are willing to pay the price for that. Something related to what Minister JÄRVAN said as well, that Estonian consumers are, I don't know if they're okay with the inflation we're having, but they are accepting it, and we can see it from companies' profit levels as well. The profits have in current prices have gone up at least as much as the prices have increased, or even more. So the companies have been able to transfer the input inflation that they are seeing to the end prices, and consumers are willing to pay for that. It might be a little bit different for companies in different sectors, of course. The ones who are concentrating on our internal market, they are maybe more in favor at the moment, because Estonian consumers are strong at the moment, whether it's coming from the savings related to the pandemic when they were just not able to spend their money, whether it's linked to, in some part, linked to the pension system reform that freed approximately 1.5 billion euros to our system and our economic system, which is roughly 10% of our yearly private consumption. That's a lot of money. But yeah, our consumers have been quite strong. I'm not sure we can say exactly the same for companies who are concentrating on export markets, because we have clearly seen weaker export demand from basically from all of our important exports or trading partners. So yeah, whether we look at different sectors, the situation is already different, and of course inside the sector companies are different as well. Now coming to the problems that companies are facing, I mean the main idea of this discussion as well is of course the inflation stemming from energy prices, and that of course is one of the most pressing problems at the moment. But also the weaker demand from export partners, what I also already mentioned. But we must not forget that our wage increase is also remaining very solid, and our companies are struggling with that as well, because this is also one of the biggest expense components on companies' balance sheets. And when we look at macro projections done by whatever institution at the moment, then yeah, of course, at the moment these projections are also linked with a very high uncertainty, but still they don't see unemployment rate going up that much. So the tight situation in our labor market will most likely consist in coming years as well. We see the unemployment rate going up a bit, and it's mostly linked to the methodology and the fact that the Ukrainian refugees are now entering the data, and their unemployment rate amongst them is higher than for Estonians in general. But still the market remains tight, and this is what keeps the pressures on wages as well. And as long as this component doesn't show any signs of relaxing, it keeps an additional pressure on our businesses. Now maybe final angle from the banking side, we can say that without going into any exact details, we haven't really seen companies' financial statements or financial situation worsening from banking side as well. Of course, businesses are struggling and are worried about the increase in prices, are worried about the restructuring of their supply chains that have already taken place and what they see that they have to do in the future. They are worried about the investments that they might have to do concerning their energy supply methods and so on. But they are coping with it so far, and then I think it's linked to the fact that they have been able to push these costs to the end consumer, and their profits haven't really taken a hit from this situation. So of course we must admit that the so to say crisis or the situation that we're in right now, it's still quite fresh, and probably these sorts of problems and trends, they will eat themselves into data with some lag. So I think that the next few quarters, that situation will definitely worsen. We can see that from macro projections as well, that the overall GDP growth is expected to fall in the next quarters. But yeah, at this moment, I can say that I still can remain cautiously optimistic that our businesses are able to adapt to the situation, and maybe the crisis won't go into these capacities or these volumes that the most darkest scenarios show us.
So Aite, thank you very much, Kristo. I think you gave us very important insights from the macro perspective also, that you pointed out that consumers accept the inflation, and also an important aspect for the discussion is also the increase of the wages. So I think this very important points we have to discuss later. And now basically I would like to give the floor to Eero. Eero also has a lot of international experience also in Asia, especially Hong Kong, and maybe you give us also a bit this the border view, and also a bit more a non-Eurocentric view on the topic. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It is nice to talk to such an international set of people and to discuss topics which are on the minds of many people in Estonia, as well as in the minds of many people elsewhere in Europe and in the world. Inflation, and also general energy prices and so forth. A few words about my background. Indeed, I have been running small businesses for the last 20 plus years. And my main background is from IT business, but now we have investments in some other fields also. And during recent years, we are most actively working with European and international projects. So predominantly, I'm in this part of Estonian economy where our customers are abroad. And then we are just participants of Estonian economic system. But then again, we have some investments in Estonia, so it's interesting to see how these are going. Now, when I think of what has been happening during the last year and what will be the foreseeable future, then indeed in Estonia, the inflation is the highest, or one of the highest in Europe, in Eurozone. And it is something which is, I think, changing the Estonian business landscape a lot. From the viewpoint of an SME owner, I think one of the interesting challenges which I'm facing every day is actually motivation. And this comes a little bit to what Dr. DURST was also mentioning, that in inflationary environment, suddenly I feel that maybe it is much more important to think of work-life balance and issues related to health and other things. But that's not necessarily maybe beneficial or good for the economy, because the reason why I, as well as many other SME owners, maybe think of it, is that I personally feel that maybe I have been doing a little bit wrongly during maybe 2 years ago, when I was putting a lot of effort in issues related to making money and issues related to actually conducting business, instead of actually spending the money which I have made. So I think that the number of businesses in Estonia have or business owners are wondering if they have been doing the correct thing in terms of putting a lot of their efforts on actively running their businesses. And this comes to also what Kristo was interesting in mentioning, that the Estonian consumers have been still continuing to spend actively. And I think this comes back to maybe what some older consumers in Estonia might remember, that I still remember when my father was in 1990s coming to bringing home random goods from random shops because they were cheaper than what they used to be. So, and he's oftentimes, these things were not particularly needed, but he said, oh, I bought it because they had not adjusted the price yet. Of course, ruble inflation in the 1990s was much stronger than what inflation is currently in Estonia now. But I think that the number of Estonian consumers are maybe trying to still consume their money, fearing inflation, buying maybe some things which are not necessarily entirely needed for them. For business point of view, for example, for me, the contracts which I make usually fix prices 2 to 3 years in advance. So it's very difficult for me to assess the risk of inflation into 2024, 2025. This leads to a motivation either to quote a very high price in order to be sure that I'm not making a loss on the particular project which I'm working on, or maybe not to make a quotation at all, because I don't want to take the risk of kind of making a project which is loss-making for me. So uncertainty has certainly increased a lot for an average Estonian SME owner. And this uncertainty means that it is much more difficult to conduct business in this kind of rising cost environment. And currently, for the foreseeable future, it's also difficult to believe that the inflation would go significantly down. Of course, there's the base effect. So because there has been a large price hike in last year, then the numbers would start looking better. But at least for an entrepreneur in Estonia, I am more and more thinking about ways how to involve, let's say, employees from outside. Because my customers are mostly English speaking, so I don't, it doesn't matter for me if I'm employing people who are based in Estonia, or if I'm employing people who are based in Portugal or Italy, like I have people now working for me from Portugal, Italy, so forth, or Asia. And I feel that this is something which maybe is good for an entrepreneur, but not maybe necessarily in long term for the Estonian economy. I think that also when we look at the investment part of the things, then in a situation of high inflation, it is very difficult to find investment possibilities where risk-adjusted return would be higher than inflation. Frankly, it's very difficult to find any investments where even in returns with very high risks would be higher than inflation has been in Estonia. And that again, kind of sometimes gives me and some other small entrepreneurs thinking maybe I should kind of, take a rest for the next 1 to 2 years and then come back when the prices have already been raising and when the economic situation is more stable. Now, it is possible to think like this only for small entrepreneurs who are in very flexible work arrangements. Of course, in case you are running a company with 100 people and you are feeling responsible that these people will get paid every day, then maybe the thinking style is a little bit different. But I believe that, that what Europe really should do is to get the inflation under control, because sometimes I'm looking with horror to countries like Turkey, where the inflation has been 70+%, And I'm thinking, what do the people over there really feel? Because life savings of many people have been deleted through this kind of inflationary pressure. And I hope that that in Europe, we are not going down this path. And I think that inflationary pressure is also, of course, especially in the European context, is driven by energy prices. But until the Ukrainian war would stop, until there will be further normalization in terms of the economic relations with Russia, then unfortunately the energy prices will not go down. What this would mean is that energy-intensive companies, of course from Estonia as well as other countries, will try to find other possibilities or also figure out ways how, or some of them will close. And that would have a negative impact on employment in Estonia. And as a last point, I would also like to mention that I think that the government should also be already start thinking about the fact if one of the ways how to help Estonian companies could be to have less people working for the government, because that would create more possibilities for skilled workforce to move from the government sector to the private sector, which would mean that the private sector would have more possibilities to work with Estonian people.
Yeah, thank you very much for your passionate input, Eero. And also I think it's one task we also should put in for Europe, or what Europe can do basically, because we are talking about some common challenges. As a German, I can say the dependence on Russia in terms of energy, mentioning Nord Stream and so on, and basically now the way now to create some independence. So I see a lot of also common challenges, but let's go now to the debate. So addressing to the audience, please feel free. And also before I'm starting the debate, are there any questions from Susanne, Kristo and Eero to each other? So do you have any points maybe you want to make or you want to share under yourself? Yeah, so then I would basically start with Susanne. I found that very interesting what you said about interviews. So could you please add a bit about the interviews you made, with whom, and what were basically the points you could take out of the interviews with entrepreneurs in Estonia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. The main idea behind this interview study was actually to learn about how crisis management is practices in small and medium-sized enterprises. And in addition to running these interviews with companies in Estonia, I did something similar in the German-speaking countries as well as in Peru, bringing a bit also this kind of international perspective Eero was highlighting, to actually show how maybe the institution in which an organization is embedded is also maybe impacting the approach to crisis management taken. And not a big surprise, what we learned in these interviews was that there is maybe nothing like a crisis management approach we would expect in a medium-sized company or a large company. So coming also back, Dr. HARTLEB, to the type of entrepreneurs included. In Estonia, here we included micro and small enterprises, primarily working in the service industry. And also, interestingly, primarily female entrepreneurs were included, which of course some people may say, specifically the men around, okay, this is already a bias, but come on guys, now, you know, typically otherwise we only have male founders when we are doing this kind of studies. So this was the focus, and as mentioned, we were interested in learning how they have experienced the crisis and what were their reactions. And when we are trying to compare, for example, the findings from Estonia with the findings from Peru, here we did the interviews in Lima. In Estonia, the companies are located in Tallinn, so both capitals, but of course the capitals are difficult to compare, but still we had companies involved. We noticed in Estonia a very proactive approach to coping with the crisis, while in Peru, it was a very reactive approach. So they were actually waiting what the government would say, what the government would allow, how they should continue with their businesses, if at all. And you see, this already shows that when we are trying to find solutions, and also then maybe solutions for only for Europe, there's no need to go actually to South America. We need to take into consideration the context. And the context in these parts of the world, Estonia, the Baltic countries, is definitely not comparable with a context like, let's say, in Switzerland or Liechtenstein. And so coming back to your question, Dr. HARTLEB, what is one finding? One finding is that context matters, and specifically also the external environment in terms of the institution. The formal institutions as well as the informal institutions which are there and definitely influencing the companies. We have heard about subsidizers. This is definitely an issue, and of course we will see this kind of subsidizers in a variety of different forms, and they all have an impact of on small and medium-sized enterprises, and specifically on small and medium-sized long-term development, because I think we all agree that simply focusing on survival is not enough. This is maybe too expensive if there are only measures that are actually trying to help companies survive. But we should actually have measures that are helping the small companies to take advantage of these specific features we have also seen in other countries, like being flexible, being adaptable, being forward-looking, etc. pp. And then if we are then also coming back, and this goes back maybe to what Eero just said, also what is then maybe required from the policymakers. And Eero, I really like your ideas that we should actually go down with the numbers of employees working with or for the public sector. We should also think of developing a public sector which is also flexible, adaptable, resilient, forward-looking, so that we are also coming closer to an environment and an entire environment. We may also call it an ecosystem that is also more aligned, and it's simply too easy to only expect something from others when we are still, sitting in our old boxes, in our old ways of thinking. But also maybe coming back to what was the main learning, specifically the main learning from the Estonian companies I have interviewed. I really like this proactive approach, and there was already this kind of understanding. We may view it in different views. This depends, of course, on where we are originally coming from. But they said, okay, we know we can't rely on the state. So that's why we have to do something. So it's a very entrepreneurial approach, a very entrepreneurial attitude. We may have seen it, let's say, Dr. HARTLEB, maybe in Germany, where we have all these kind of support measures. And Germany, of course, is not the only country. Also think about France, very strong when it comes to supporting companies. Maybe in this case, they are louder. No? They are louder when it comes, we need this, we need that. Unfortunately, we have noticed that specifically the large companies were very vocal when it came to asking for support measures, even though they got this kind of support already before. So the quintessence is maybe that we as policymakers, and then maybe also if we are thinking of the wider environment, and then I would also like to include education and training institutions, specifically universities. We should, I think it would be nice to have a closer focus on small and medium-sized enterprises, and also try to align us more with them, learn more from them, and talk more with them and not about them. I think this would be already a way forward to really have more participated approaches, inclusive approaches, where the relevant stakeholders really sit together, considering the other side as a partner of equal standing, and not thinking, okay, because I have the professor title, because I have the doctor titles, that's why I'm better than the other one. I think this is not really helpful. And specifically, if we are thinking about a solution, which could also be then derived from what I have said before, this could be maybe an approach to take on the next challenges. And we know after the inflation and all the other challenges, there will be more. There will be more challenges, there will be different challenges. We have to make sure that we have really learned something from the past. Very often, to be honest, I have my doubts. We are reinventing the wheel. We are repeating the same mistakes. And I think this is something we should definitely stop. We should learn to make new mistakes, different mistakes.
Thank you very much. Are there direct comments or questions on the many points you tackled now? Otherwise, I would ask a specific question now to Kristo. The point is, I'm living in Tallinn, Estonia's capital, and you see a lot of booming in the field of flats and houses. They're growing everywhere. You have no districts like Kopli, which when I was here like 10 years ago, they're totally different. But do you see that basically you were speaking about the increase of the wages, but there are also the question of people are taking loans or took loans. How you would say that, or what is your point on that from the banking sector? Can it be that this is a big bubble in a couple of years, that we are facing a new banking crisis like we had 2009, 2010, or how would you see that? Or can people simply afford it due to the increase of the wages, as you pointed out?
The real estate prices have really gone up a lot last few years.
It's the biggest in Europe, I think, from the 90s.
Absolutely,
it was the biggest increase from the statistics, right? Sorry.
Absolutely. And there have been several reasons for that. One is the overall rise in income levels that I spoke of. In the last few years, I would say that one of the reasons has been the success in our IT sector as well. We have had several deals in IT sector made that have brought a huge amount of money to Estonia, and then part of that money has found its way to the real estate sector as investments, and that has also pushed up the prices. Now, what we all like to do, we all like to compare the situation with 2008-2009 crisis, what's happened in real estate. I don't think the situation is very similar. Economists like to watch, like to follow an indicator where we compare the level of the price level of average price level of a square meter in real estate to our average salary. That basically how many square meters can you afford for an average salary, and we can say that balance has shifted a little bit in the last year or last year and a half maybe. For a long time now, the multiplier or the ratio was approximately 1. So you could get 1 square meter of real estate for a monthly average salary in Estonia. Right now, it's about maybe 1.15, 1.2. So the price has gone up, meaning that one square meter now costs 1.2 average salaries. Then, yeah. But if we compare that to the prices 10 years ago or 15 years ago now already, then that multiplier was around 1.8, 1.9. So we are far from that level. So we can say that the prices of real estate and our salaries have risen by and large in the same pace if we leave out the last few years. And also we have to take into account the fact that the price increases in different segments of real estates are also different. The large increases in real estate prices in the last years have been led by new developments. What Dr. HARTLEB mentioned as well, like areas like Kopli, like Kalamaja, Noblessner, and so on, where the square meter prices have risen very, very much. But it hasn't been the case for all segments. If we look at the prices for real estate in aftermarkets, if we look at the prices for real estate in Mustamäe and Lasnamäe, where are like residential areas with buildings built in the 80s, in the 90s, then the price increases haven't been so huge. So the situation is kind of it's not very comparable to the 08-09 crisis. Now, from other side, of course, after that crisis, the Financial Supervision Authority in Estonia, as well as in Europe and in global context as well, they did a lot of changes, and the lending from banking sector to real estate to buy real estate, it's become much more responsible. So the banking sector have weighed or measured possible clients much more thoroughly, and they give out loans more carefully. So the overall quality and of the loan book is much better at the moment than it was during that crisis. And another thing, if we think about the economy as a whole, then we can say that at this point the personal or household saving rate in Estonia is between 10 to 15% of monthly income that the households save. At 10-15 years ago, during that crisis or leading up to that crisis in 2006-2007, it was a negative number. We were borrowing money, we were lending as a economy as a whole was lending to consume. This isn't happening at the moment. So the consumers are stronger, and the real estate owners who are paying back their mortgages as a group, as a whole, they are much stronger. So at the moment, there's no reason to expect that we are going to have the same sort of crisis, or that the situation is going to go that bad. And of course, if we think about the economy as a whole as well, during that crisis, we had an accumulated drop in GDP around 20% in Estonia. No one is talking about these kinds of numbers at the moment. We are talking about whether we're going to have a slight decrease in GDP, probably this year in 2022. Maybe we're going to have like zero growth in the next year. But we're not talking about huge economic drop or economic crisis, and so that as well gives like the comparable background that the situation is better at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for all these thoughts and all your argumentation. So I have no specific question now to Eero, because we also running out a bit of time. So we have just like 5 minutes left. So Eero, just take it over, please, and bring in your thoughts after all these aspects, please.
I think it has been interesting to hear that both from the macroeconomic view from Kristo, as well as from the expectations of different SME owners and managers from Susanne. One thing which I'm wondering if that would happen within the next half year is that in case we see difficulties in certain sectors in Estonia for the next half a year, either due to increase of energy prices, or maybe sometimes also due to increase of salary levels, then I think particularly SME owners should be a little bit worried about if their bills get paid. Because I think that this kind of cascading debt situation could be dangerous for the economy. I'm not sure if this is yet visible in the society, but I think that some SME owners in Estonia are also concerned about that. Particularly, for example, in case people are, let's say, wholesalers, or people who are selling goods at a relatively low margin, then in case 1 or 2 customers out of 10 are going to not to pay their bills, then this would be dangerous for the SME managers to actually to keep the liquidity of their companies. And I also think that when we compare to the previous crisis, then in 2007, 2008, the liquidity was an issue which was actually drawing down a few which was quite problematic for a few companies. So this is one of my comments. And I think that, of course, I also hope that the Estonian economy would be still going further, but also I'm a little bit afraid, again, macroeconomic specialists can comment more on that, but of the possibility of stagflation, because we do have relatively high inflation, and currently stagflation, especially in the context of Estonia being in a situation where we know that the Eurozone interest rates are not going to be adjusted according to us. And we know that in some of the southern states, there is certainly a motivation to keep the interest rates low. Then this could mean that the inflation is ongoing. But then again, economic growth, especially in Estonia, cannot be so high after the kind of this resources which are within our society have been used in the context of internal consumption. Because after all, it is so that in long term, it's important that the exporters of Estonia would be competitive.
So Aite, thank you very much. I also want to refer to a study from Mr. Paul Rübig, very active for SME Europe and also long-time member of the European Parliament. He posted in the chat his study on emergency preparedness, and I got a lot out of this debate. I'm positively surprised out of this topic, and that's thanks to you that you basically gave us so many different aspects and thoughts. And I think we have to go further with the topic, and I think it's also very important that we are seeing the situation in the Baltic states and in Estonia also from the European perspective, but also for Europe. And on that side, now we already are in 4 days, we have Christmas. I wish you all the best health, I can say from my perspective, when we see the big flus going around. And let's hope for a good year next, and that we are also implementing some ideas which you gave to us. So on that side, I would like to give back to SME Europe, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I would also like to thank our speakers for lending their expertise, and thank you all for joining us for this interesting discussion today. For those who couldn't stay the entire time, this webcast was recorded and we will share the recording once it has been uploaded on YouTube. For more information on our working group and upcoming events, please visit our website at smeeurope.eu. And once again, thank you very much for everyone for attending, and I wish you also like a great day, good health, and a happy holiday season.